Hey guys, Rob Tech Garage here. Today I'm going to be installing a AEM wideband air-fuel ratio gauge into the 2016 Camaro. I'll show you how we're going to be doing it. So we have the gauge right here. It is the here it is. It's the X-Series wideband gauge here for air-fuel ratio. So we're going to be installing the gauge itself. We're going to be using a vent pod that will mount into where the vent is on the driver's side by the window there. And we will be installing from an electrical, for the electrical we will be installing a ADA circuit into the fuse box. So let's get going. Okay, so now we're inside the vehicle. Just to open up and give myself some space and so I can see what was going on. First thing I did was pulled back this panel right here. And I just used my fingers for this. I just gripped in a couple different places and slowly worked it out. But it pops off, as you can see there. And then the next thing I did was, I did the same thing here. I just used my hands. You can use some kind of panel tool if you want to open this stuff up as well. And so I just popped off this other side panel here to give myself a little more access to stuff. And pull it back a little bit. The vent pod itself, right here. So the vent pod right here will mount right in here, which will continue to allow air to flow through right there to some degree for venting to defrosting and stuff, but allows you to mount the gauge in here. So next thing we're going to need to do here is get this vent out of here, which I am going to use the tool for that. Okay, so we have the vent out now, and we will be running wires up through here into the vent pod, and then we'll be getting the vent pod installed. So, okay, for the wiring for this, what we have is we have one cord that goes to the O2 sensor that will run down into the exhaust. So the cable, one end of the cable plugs into the back of the gauge itself, and the other end will run down into the exhaust. And then the second cable that we have here, again, one end plugs into the back of the gauge, and then there's two other ends to this one. You have the OBD plug that lets you data log the air-fuel ratio, and then also you have a power here as well. Okay, to feed the cable from the engine bay into the vehicle itself, I'm going to be feeding them through the sound tube hole. The sound tube that comes with the stock vehicles that runs from the air intake into the vehicle was removed as part of the Whipple installation. So currently there's just a cover to the sound delete hole that runs from the engine bay here into the vehicle itself. Unfortunately, with the Whipple, it is stuck way back in there and is a major pain to get to. So essentially, and I'm not even going to be able to get to it all the way and show you, but the sound delete hole itself is back in here, and the only way to get to it is to down through here. And basically, to get that thing undone, I had to lay on top of the Whipple supercharger and unbolt that to get the cover off there. And now I currently was able to feed in the O2 sensor cable into there, and next I'm going to be feeding the power cable from the inside of the vehicle out to the fuse box over here. Okay guys, I'm going to show you where I routed the wires in the inside of the car. As always, I mean, I've never done this before, so I'm doing it, kind of figuring it out as I go here. If you decide to follow what I do, that's up to you, but no responsibilities on my behalf if something doesn't work out for you, as always. So, but here's how I routed it. I'll let you take a look here. Okay, we're underneath the dash now, and where I have the flashlight there, that's where the sound tube comes in from the engine, so you can see the wiring as it's entering the car up there, and then it's routing towards the over towards the driver's side door over on the other side. So we'll take a look on the upper side now. Okay, so initially I routed the wires to this opening on the side here where I had pulled off this panel over here. The instructions want you to drill a hole in the vent, in the upper defrost vent tube, which I can tell you right now is a giant pain to get to be able to put a drill on that. I ended up having to take off some side paneling here that's covering the side airbag, which quite honest made me pretty nervous. Negative battery cable is disabled during this entire process, just so you know, so make sure you do that. And also had to remove this vent cover back here for the speaker. At that point, it gave me just a little bit of access on the side here. There's a screw here that I had to undo. And if I lift it up on this, you can see the wires coming up there, but basically I was able to get a drill bit back on that vent tube that's coming, the defrost vent tube, and drill it in there and then feed the wires through it. And now up on the top here, you can see the two sets of wires that I have running out of the vent now. And like I said, it's a giant pain to get to. There's got to be an easier way. So if somebody's done this differently and a heck of a lot easier, post some comments down below and let people know, because I looked at this for quite a while and couldn't figure out any way to get to it, and this is the way I did it. But I can't say this is the right way. Can't say it's the best way. It's just the way that I got it done. So as always, I'll next thing we'll be doing here is I'm going to hook up the wires to the gauge in the vent and get that installed here. Okay, so you can see there now I have the wires ran up. I've got the gauge attached to the wires. They're running through the vent gauge here. I've wrapped some electrical tape around the edge of the gauge there. It was a little bit loose in there. Instructions recommended putting some electrical tape around to tighten it up. Next thing I'm going to do is where the cables come up through there, they say you don't want any hot air coming up in there, so you're supposed to block it off. This particular vent gauge that I bought, pod, came with a little bit of putty, so you're supposed to use this putty to clog it up. So I'm going to clog up the putty, I'm going to put this thing back together, and then I'm going to move to the engine bay where we can hook up the electrical and run the O2 sensor down to the exhaust. Okay, there's a look at the inside with everything all buttoned back up there and the gauge up top there. You can see it up there with the you can see that there's still some defrost vent opening there where the air would still come out for defrost purposes. I can't say I'm entirely happy with the fit of the vent pod. It's kind of loose in there. It's not as tight. I mean, I felt like it should snap into there, but it doesn't. So I think I'm gonna probably end up getting some kind of double-sided sticky tape or something and putting it around the edges and push it back in there to hold it in place. I just don't feel like it's that secure. It's in there, but I feel like it was popping out earlier, so we'll see. Now on to the wiring. So at this point we're underneath the car, we're on the driver's side, and from a reference point, it's the front of the car up there. You can see the oil filter right up here. and then the exhaust is coming down here, and then you come into the catalytic converter. There's an O2 sensor right up here above in front of the catalytic converter, and then there's a second O2 sensor right here that's behind the catalytic converter. So as a temporary spot, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the second O2 sensor right here and plug it in there. Long term, I will put it in front of the cats, which is ideal, but for now, since I'm going to eventually be putting on long tube headers, and I'll put it in the collector on the long tube headers before the high flow cat, for now I'm just going to mount it here as a temporary item. So I'll remove this. I'll end up wrapping it up somewhere in here and tying it off up here. It'll end up throwing a code, so I'm going to have to find out where in the HP tuners I can turn off this sensor so I don't throw the code. But that's what I'm going to do for now. So I'll get this loosened up, the other one installed in, and then we'll come back. Okay guys, I wanted to show you, I'll show you how I ended up wiring this thing. The wiring is running from the sound delete opening between the engine bay and the front of the car, inside the car there. I ran it behind the Whipple supercharger, back behind there, and then it comes out on this side right here. I put the ground right here. I tested that ground against the engine or the battery. It seems to be a decent ground. And then I ran the wiring along here using some zip ties along the way to stabilize it into the fuse box. So right along here, wiring running along here, zip tied, coming up here underneath the coolant beside it, and then back to the fuse box there. In the fuse box itself, I used a connect-a-fuse here to connect it up, and I plugged it into fuse F22, or I'm sorry, it's F42. So I plugged it in. I'm going to be plugging it into F42, which is right, that opening right there, right here. So the opening right there is where I'm going to plug it into, and that is what they refer to as a 10 amp IP body ignition fuse. So in reading what that entails there, that is used for the inside rearview mirror, the HVAC control module, and headlamp leveling switch, none of which I consider to be critical to the car running. So if it blew a fuse for some reason, it wouldn't be critical for the engine running or the car starting. So that's what I chose there. And with this connect-a-fuse, you can see the 10 amp fuse from the existing fuse goes there, and then the 5 amp fuse which feeds to the wideband is on top there, and they plug in. It simply plugs in like so. The other thing I've been debating here too, because right now you cannot, it's kind of an enclosed box here, so you cannot actually close the box completely. I'll show you there. So the box right now will close on the one side, on this side right here, and lock in, but it will not close here because the wire's in the way, right? What I've debated doing, try to get you over here. I've debated drilling a hole diagonally. So I debated drilling a hole diagonally down through here and feeding the wire up through there, and then putting some silicone there to kind of seal it in place. But I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do there yet. So if anybody has any ideas on that, or if you've already installed something like this into this fuse box, which seals on there tightly, go ahead and post a comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking on that. Something, if I need something else to consider there. Okay, we're back in the car here. You can see the gauge is now operating. Right now it's set to the air-fuel ratio And you can change it if you want with the mode setting here. So if you got lambda there, so you can switch to lambda. Now it's reading lambda. And if you're going to use lambda, which ultimately I think I'm going to do, you need to switch this plate around. So I'll have to pull it back out there, and you can flip that plate over, and the other side is lambda. The problem with the air-fuel ratio is it's set for stoichiometric at 14.65, which is gasoline with no ethanol, and your standard premium has 10% ethanol, so it's not quite reading the correct reading if you're on air-fuel ratio. Anyways, what I'll do is I will put a link to this particular AEM X-Series wideband to Amazon. So if you want to see some pricing on them, or if you want to get more information on them, I'll put a link down below there. And if you do decide to buy it from Amazon, make sure you use the link that I have below. That way you can support the channel. If you use the link, Amazon will give me a few dollars for referring you to them. Price for you doesn't change, just a little bit goes to me instead of Amazon. The other thing I'm going to do too is I will post up a separate video after this one, which will show how I connected it to HP tuners for data logging. And of course, if you haven't subscribed before, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Also like and share. Thank you.